The 70-year-old Korean billionaire had a secret so terrifying that every woman ran the moment they discovered it. But when 21-year-old Layla Jefferson walked into his world, she didn't run. She stayed. And that choice changed everything. Like this video if you've ever stayed when everyone else told you to run. Subscribe to Love and Tension to see what happens when courage meets danger. What would you do if the most powerful man in the city offered you protection, but at what cost? Comment below with your answer. The lights of Galaxy Savings Bank buzzed overhead as Layla Jefferson counted the crumpled bills one more time. $347. 6 months of working double shifts at Rosie's Diner, sleeping 4 hours a night, skipping meals, all to keep the debt collectors from her father's funeral away from the tiny apartment she shared with her younger sister, Zara. Next, the teller called, her voice dripping with the kind of boredom that came from processing human desperation daily. Layla approached the counter, her fingers trembling slightly as she pushed the money forward. At 21, she'd already learned that the world measured your worth in dollar signs, and hers always came up short. Her natural hair was pulled back in a simple bun, her uniform from the diner still carrying the faint smell of grease and coffee. The teller, a middle-aged white woman named Patricia, according to her name tag, looked her up and down with barely concealed disdain. "I need to make a payment on account number 477298, Layla said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. Patricia typed slowly, each keystroke deliberate, as if inputting the information was a personal inconvenience. "You're 3 months behind. This doesn't even cover the interest." "I know, but it's something." Layla straightened her spine, refusing to let this woman see her break. She'd watched her father, Marcus Jefferson, she flinched internally at the common name her parents had given him, beg banks and loan sharks for mercy before cancer took him. She'd learned early that dignity was sometimes all you had left. "Something isn't enough." Patricia's lips curled into something between a smirk and a sneer. "You people always think you can just pay whatever you want, whenever you want. That's not how it works." The words hit like a slap. "You people." Layla's jaw tightened, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. She'd heard variations of this her entire life, in classrooms, in job interviews, on streets where she didn't belong. But she needed this payment processed, so she swallowed the anger burning in her throat. "Just process the payment, please," Layla said, quietly. "Maybe you should have thought about this before taking on debt you couldn't handle," Patricia continued, her voice rising enough that other customers turned to watch. "Coming in here with pocket change like it means something. Typical." Layla felt the blood drain from her face. The bank suddenly felt smaller, the walls closing in as every eye turned toward her. This was public humiliation, deliberate and cruel. Patricia wanted an audience for this degradation. "That's enough." The voice cut through the space like a blade, quiet, controlled, but carrying an authority that made everyone freeze. Layla turned to see a man standing 3 people behind her in line. He was older, much older, she guessed around 70, with silver hair swept back from a face that carried the weight of decades. Korean, impeccably dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than her annual rent, but it was his eyes that caught her, dark, sharp, assessing everything with the precision of someone who'd spent a lifetime reading people for survival. He moved forward with deliberate steps, and Layla noticed something strange. The other customers shifted away from him instinctively, like animals sensing a predator. Even Patricia's condescending expression faltered, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. "Sir, this doesn't concern." "Process her payment." His accent was slight, his English perfect but shaped by Korean vowels. "Now." It wasn't a request. Patricia's fingers flew over the keyboard, printing out a receipt so fast it almost tore. She shoved it across the counter toward Layla without another word, her earlier arrogance completely evaporated. Layla stood frozen, clutching the receipt, trying to understand what had just happened. The man didn't look at her, didn't acknowledge her directly. He simply existed in that space with a presence that bent reality around him. "Thank you," Layla managed, her voice barely above a whisper. He finally turned those dark eyes on her, and Layla felt something cold run down her spine. Not fear exactly, more like recognition. She'd grown up around dangerous men, her father's gambling debts bringing loan sharks and criminals to their door. This man had that same energy, but refined, controlled, infinitely more dangerous because of it. Some people forget that respect costs nothing, he said softly, then moved past her to conduct his own business. Layla left the bank in a daze, stepping out into the Chicago afternoon heat. The encounter played on a loop in her mind. Who was he? Why had Patricia, who'd been so cruel seconds before, obeyed him instantly? And why did Layla feel like she'd just witnessed something that would change the trajectory of her life? She was halfway to the bus stop when she noticed the black car, a Mercedes S-Class, sleek and expensive, idling at the curb. The back window rolled down, and there he was again, the man from the bank. "Get in," he said simply. Every instinct Layla had developed growing up in Inglewood screamed at her to run. Strange men in expensive cars meant danger, but something else, maybe exhaustion, maybe curiosity, maybe the reckless part of her that had kept her alive this long, made her walk toward the car instead. "I don't even know your name," she said, standing by the open window. "Choi Hyun-jun." He said it like she should recognize it, like those syllables carried weight. "And you're making a scene standing there. People are watching." Layla glanced around. He was right. Pedestrians were giving the car and her nervous looks. She made a decision that would later seem insane and climbed in. The interior smelled like leather and something expensive she couldn't name. A driver sat up front behind a partition, silent and still. Choi Hyun-jun watched her with that same assessing gaze, and Layla forced herself to meet his eyes. "Why did you help me?" she asked. No point dancing around it. "I hate bullies." His answer was simple, direct. "That woman was a bully. I stopped her." "Just like that?" "Just like that." He leaned back, studying her. "You have a steel spine, Miss Jefferson, Layla Jefferson." She waited for the inevitable questions about why she needed to make such a small payment, why she looked so worn down at 21, but they didn't come. "Layla," he repeated, tasting the syllables. "You didn't cry in there. Most people would have." "Crying doesn't change anything." The words came out harder than she intended, carrying the weight of too many nights spent sobbing into her pillow where Zara couldn't hear. Something flickered in Choi's expression. Approval, maybe, or recognition. No, it doesn't. They drove in silence through downtown Chicago, and Layla realized she should probably be more afraid than she was. But growing up around her father's debts had given her a strange calibration for danger. This man wasn't going to hurt her. She felt that instinctively. He was something else entirely. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. "Where do you need to go?" "Home. Inglewood." The driver's eyes flickered to the rearview mirror just for a second. Choi noticed and smiled, a thin, cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Inglewood it is." As they drove, Layla snuck glances at him. Up close, she could see faint scars on his hands, the kind that came from violence. A tattoo peeked from beneath his collar. She couldn't make out the design, but it looked intricate, traditional. This was not a legitimate businessman, no matter how expensive his suit. "What do you do, Mr. Choi?" The question was bold, maybe stupid, but Layla had learned that ignorance got you killed faster than knowledge in certain circles. "Import, export." His lips twitched. "Various business ventures." "That's deliberately vague." "Yes, it is." He met her directness with amusement. "You're perceptive. That's good. Keeps you alive." The casualness with which he mentioned staying alive sent another chill through her. "Should I be worried right now? If I wanted to hurt you, Miss Jefferson, you'd never have made it to the car." He said it matter-of-factly, the way someone might comment on the weather. "I have a different proposition." Layla's stomach dropped. She'd heard about propositions from powerful men before, seen what they did to girls from her neighborhood. "I'm not interested in employment," Choi interrupted smoothly. "I need someone young, intelligent, and able to navigate both wealthy circles and street-level operations. You speak English natively, understand how to read dangerous situations, and most importantly, you're not easily intimidated. That teller tried to destroy you, and you stood there with your head high. You want to hire me? For what? I'll be honest, Miss Jefferson, I don't have many years left." He said it without emotion. Pure fact. 70 years in this world. Most of them spent building an empire that good people would call criminal. I need someone who can help me with philanthropic ventures, community outreach, redemptive work. Layla almost laughed at the absurdity, a criminal wanting redemption through charity work, but the laugh died in her throat when she saw his expression. He was completely serious. "Why me?" "Because you remind me of someone." His voice softened almost imperceptibly. "A long time ago, there was a young woman who cleaned houses to put food on the table. She had the same fire in her eyes that you do, the same refusal to break. She raised me after my parents died, taught me that dignity mattered more than money." He paused, though I forgot that lesson for many years. The confession was unexpected, vulnerable in a way that seemed completely at odds with the dangerous man sitting across from her. Layla felt something shift in her understanding of him. "I need to think about it," she said finally. Choi pulled a card from his jacket pocket. Heavy stock, embossed lettering. Just a phone number, no name. "Call when you decide. The offer stands for 48 hours. The car stopped outside her apartment building, a crumbling structure that had seen better decades. Choi didn't comment on it, didn't let his gaze linger with pity or judgment. He simply nodded as she climbed out. "Thank you for the ride," Layla said. "Thank you for not screaming," he replied with that thin smile. "Most people do." The Mercedes pulled away, leaving Layla standing on the cracked sidewalk with a business card in her hand and 1,000 questions spinning through her mind. She looked up at her apartment window, where Zara would be doing homework by lamplight because their electricity was on a payment plan. 48 hours to decide if she wanted to step into a world that terrified even bank tellers. 48 hours to choose between safety and survival. As Layla climbed the stairs to her apartment, exhaustion pulling at every muscle, she couldn't shake the feeling that Choi Hyun-jun had just offered her something far more dangerous than a job. He'd offered her a doorway, and once she stepped through, there would be no going back. Inside the apartment, Zara looked up from her geometry homework, her 16-year-old face still carrying traces of baby fat that made Layla's chest ache with protective instinct. "Who was in that fancy car?" Zara asked, eyes wide. Layla tucked the business card into her pocket, feeling its weight like a loaded gun. "Just someone who helped me at the bank. Must have been really helpful to drive you home." "Yeah." Layla moved to the kitchen, starting dinner from the minimal groceries they had. Really helpful. But as she chopped vegetables and listened to Zara talk about her school day, Layla's mind kept returning to those dark, assessing eyes, to the way Patricia had crumbled at his mere presence, to the scars on his hands and the tattoo beneath his collar, to the casual way he'd mentioned staying alive. Who was Choi Hyun-jun? And more importantly, who would Layla become if she called that number? The answer would come sooner than she expected, and it would drag her into a world where the debt collectors seemed like child's play. Have you ever met someone who changed your entire life in a single conversation? Comment below what happened. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Love and Tension for the next chapter of Layla's dangerous choice. Layla lasted 36 hours before she called the number. It wasn't a romantic decision or a reckless one. It was pure mathematics. That morning, Zara had come down with a fever, the kind that required medicine they couldn't afford and a doctor's visit they'd have to put on credit. The electricity bill sat unopened on the counter, stamped with red letters threatening disconnection, and the debt collectors had started calling again, their voices smooth and threatening, promising to garnish her wages from the diner. She stared at Choi's card, turning it over in her fingers. The paper was heavy, expensive, the kind of thing that screamed money and power. Everything her life wasn't. "Screw it," she muttered, and dialed. He answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting. "Miss Jefferson, how did you know it was me? I gave you the only card with this number." There was amusement in his voice. "Have you decided?" Layla looked at Zara sleeping on the couch, her dark skin flushed with fever, her body curled under their threadbare blanket. What exactly would this job entail? "Meet me her dinner, Matsuhisa, 7 p.m. I'll have a car pick you up." "I don't have clothes for—" "That will be handled. 6:30 p.m. outside your building." He hung up before she could protest. Layla stood there, phone still pressed to her ear, wondering what she'd just agreed to. But when Zara coughed in her sleep, the sound rattling in her chest, Layla knew she'd made the only choice available. At 6:15, a box arrived at her door. Inside was a dress, simple, elegant, black. It fit perfectly, which should have unsettled her more than it did. Alongside it were shoes, modest heels that wouldn't destroy her feet. It fit perfectly, which should have unsettled her more than it did. Alongside it were shoes, modest heels that wouldn't destroy her feet, and a note in precise handwriting: dignity first, power second. CHJ. The Mercedes arrived exactly at 6:30. Same driver, different route. They drove north into the Gold Coast, where buildings glittered with wealth that seemed obscene compared to the south side she'd just left. Matsuhisa sat like a jewel among them, the kind of restaurant where entrees cost what Layla made in a week. Choi waited at a private table in the back, wearing another immaculate suit, charcoal gray this time. He stood when she approached, a gesture of old-world courtesy that seemed strange coming from someone who radiated danger. "You clean up well," he observed as she sat. "You know my address, my phone number, and apparently my dress size," Layla countered. "Want to tell me what else you know about me?" That thin smile again. "Father died 8 months ago. Cancer. He left gambling debts totaling $47,000. Your mother passed when you were 12. Diabetes complications. You've been raising your younger sister since your father got too sick to work. Graduated high school with a 3.8 GPA, but couldn't afford college. You work 60-hour weeks at Rosie's Diner and take the bus everywhere because you can't afford a car. You eat 1 meal a day so Zara can have 2. Should I continue?" Layla's hands clenched under the table. The invasion of privacy should have made her angry, but instead she felt something else, a strange relief that someone finally saw the full scope of her struggle. "That's thorough. I don't make offers blindly." He poured her water from a crystal pitcher. "And I don't waste my time on people who'll break under pressure. You've been under pressure your entire life, Miss Jefferson. You're still standing. What do you want from me?" Layla leaned forward, keeping her voice low. The restaurant hummed with quiet conversation, the wealthy diners oblivious to the negotiation happening in their midst. "And please, no more vague import-export nonsense. I grew up around loan sharks and street dealers. I know what you are." Choi's expression shifted. Approval. Definite approval. "Good. Lies waste time we don't have." He set down his glass. "I run a network that handles, let's call it, redistribution of goods and services. Some legal, many not. I've done this for 48 years, built something vast and profitable. And in that time, I've made enemies, hurt people, destroyed lives for profit. You're a crime lord." "Essentially, yes." He said it without shame or pride, just fact. "But I'm also 70 years old, Miss Jefferson, and lately I've been thinking about that woman who raised me, my grandmother. She died believing I'd become a good man." His jaw tightened. "She was wrong." Layla waited, sensing there was more. "I can't undo the past, but I can do something with the time I have left." Choi's dark eyes met hers. "I want to build community centers in neighborhoods like yours, offer job training, education programs, protection from the kind of predators who feed on poverty, legitimate help, but I need someone who understands those communities, who can bridge the gap between my world and theirs, someone who won't be seen as another rich outsider trying to buy salvation. You want me to be your conscience," Layla said slowly. "I want you to be my connection to redemption," he corrected softly. "I'll pay you $5,000 a month. Cover your father's debts within 6 months, set up a trust for Zara's education, give you resources to actually help people instead of just surviving." The numbers made Layla's head spin. $5,000 a month was more than she made in 3 months at the diner. No more debt collectors, no more choosing between electricity and food, no more watching Zara wear shoes with holes because they couldn't afford new ones. What's the catch? Because there was always a catch. "The catch," Choi said carefully, "is that you'll be associated with me. My enemies become your enemies. My protection becomes your protection. You step into my world, and there's no stepping back cleanly. Some people will hate you for it. Some will try to use you to get to me. And some," he paused, Some will try to hurt you simply because they can. Layla processed this, her mind racing through scenarios. She'd grown up around violence, understood the currency of fear and power. But this was different. This was choosing to walk into the fire instead of just living next to it. How should I trust that you won't hurt me? The question hung between them. You shouldn't, Choi replied honestly. Trust is earned, not given. But I'll tell you this, Miss Jefferson. I've killed people, Miss Jefferson. Many people. But never someone innocent, and never someone who worked for me loyally. My word, once given, is absolute. In my world, that's the only thing that matters. A waiter appeared with food Layla hadn't ordered, sushi arranged like art, miso soup in lacquered bowls. She realized Choi had pre-selected everything, another small display of control. But the food smelled incredible, and her stomach growled traitorously. Eat, he encouraged. Decisions are better made without hunger clouding judgment. They ate in silence for several minutes. Layla savored each bite, the fish melting on her tongue like nothing she'd ever tasted. Across from her, Choi ate with the same precise control he applied to everything, measured, deliberate, waste-free. If I say yes, Layla began, I need ground rules. Name them. Zara stays out of this. Whatever happens, she doesn't get dragged into your world. She goes to school, lives normally, never knows the details. Agreed. I won't do anything illegal. I'll help with the community work, the legitimate stuff, but I'm not running drugs or laundering money or whatever else your organization does. Agreed. That's not what I need you for. And if I want out, she left the sentence hanging. Choi's expression grew serious. I won't stop you. But understand that leaving doesn't erase what you'll learn, who you'll meet, what you'll become associated with. The world doesn't let you go just because you want to leave. It was the most honest thing anyone had ever said to her about a job offer. Layla set down her chopsticks, studying the man across from her. He was dangerous, she didn't doubt that for a second, but he was also direct, clear about the risks, and offering her a chance to actually make a difference instead of just surviving day to day. I have one more question, she said. That woman at the bank, Patricia, she was terrified of you. Why? Choi's smile was sharp, predatory. Because 5 years ago, her husband tried to embezzle from one of my businesses. I had a conversation with him. He returned the money, quit his job, and moved to Arizona. Patricia knows that people who cross me tend to disappear one way or another. Fear is efficient, Miss Jefferson. It ends problems before they begin. The casual way he discussed ruining someone's life should have sent Layla running. But instead, she thought about Patricia's cruel words, the deliberate public humiliation, the way she'd tried to grind Layla into nothing just because she could. Maybe fear from someone like Choi was exactly what people like Patricia needed. Okay, Layla said quietly. I'll take the job. Choi's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Satisfaction, maybe, or relief. You start Monday. My driver will pick you up at 8 a.m. Dress professionally, but comfortably. You'll be visiting sites for potential community centers. That's it? No contract? No legal paperwork? In my world, a verbal agreement means more than any paper. You've given your word. That's enough. He signaled for the check, which appeared and disappeared without Layla ever seeing a bill. One more thing, Miss Jefferson. Starting tomorrow, you'll have security. A man named Dante Reeves will be your shadow. He'll keep you safe. I don't need a bodyguard. You do now. Choi stood, and Layla realized dinner was over. By working for me, you've painted a target on your back. Dante ensures that target stays theoretical. The drive home was quiet, Layla's mind spinning with everything that had just happened. She'd agreed to work for a criminal, accepted money that came from illegal activities, stepped into a world that would mark her forever. But when she walked into her apartment and saw Zara sleeping peacefully, fever broken, color returning to her cheeks, Layla felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. She pulled out her phone and typed a text to the diner. I'm giving my 2 weeks' notice. Thank you for everything. Sent. No going back now. Layla sat on the edge of their shared bed, watching Zara breathe, and wondered what version of herself she'd become in Choi Hyun-jun's world. Would she stay Layla Jefferson, the girl from Englewood who fought tooth and nail for every inch of dignity? Or would she transform into something else entirely, someone harder, colder, more like the man who'd just bought her loyalty with the promise of salvation? She didn't know yet, but Monday morning, she'd start finding out. Outside her window, the Chicago night hummed with sirens and distant music. Somewhere in this city, Choi Hyun-jun was building an empire of redemption on foundations of blood and violence, and Layla had just agreed to help him. God help them both. When was the last time you chose danger over safety because you had no other choice? Drop your story in the comments. We see you. Monday morning arrived with unexpected sunshine and the presence of Dante Reeves outside Layla's apartment building. He was impossible to miss. 6'4", built like he ate dumbbells for breakfast, with dark skin a few shades deeper than Layla's and eyes that constantly scanned their surroundings. Former military, she guessed from the way he carried himself. He wore a simple black suit that somehow looked both professional and ready for violence. Miss Jefferson, he nodded as she approached. I'm Dante. Mr. Choi assigned me to you. How long have you worked for him? Layla asked as they walked toward the waiting car. A different vehicle today, a black SUV with tinted windows. 8 years. Dante opened the door for her. He saved my life in Kandahar when I had nothing left. I owe him everything. Another piece of the Choi puzzle, a man who inspired absolute loyalty from people like Dante, who'd clearly seen the worst humanity had to offer and still chose to protect Choi's interests. What did that say about the man she now worked for? The first site was a gutted warehouse in Bronzeville, 3 stories of potential surrounded by chain-link fence. Choi stood inside, talking with architects and contractors, his silver hair catching the light streaming through broken windows. He looked different here, less polished, more engaged, like this mattered in a way his criminal empire never had. Miss Jefferson, he waved her over. Tell me what you see. Layla walked through the space, her footsteps echoing off concrete. She imagined it transformed. Computer lab on one side, job training center on another, community meeting space in the middle, a place where kids like her and Zara could learn skills that didn't involve street corners and desperation. I see potential, she said finally, but you'll need more than just space. You'll need people from the community running it, not outsiders. Otherwise, it's just another rich person's vanity project. One of the architects, a white man in his 50s, scoffed. That's not how professional development works. Layla turned to him, channeling every ounce of the steel spine Choi had identified. Then your professional development doesn't work for communities like this. People here have been promised help before. They've watched projects fail because nobody listened to what they actually needed. You want this to succeed? You start by respecting that the people who live here aren't problems to be solved. They're experts in their own survival. Silence. The architect's face reddened. But Choi smiled, that thin, dangerous smile. She's right, he said simply. Adjust the plans accordingly. Miss Jefferson will oversee community consultation. Just like that, the dynamic shifted. Layla had expected to be the token hire, the pretty face Choi could point to as proof of good intentions. Instead, he'd just given her real power. The architects and contractors looked at her differently now. With wariness, yes, but also respect. They visited 2 more sites that day, each time Choi asking for her input, each time listening when she pushed back on plans that felt disconnected from reality. By the time they returned to the SUV, Layla was exhausted but energized in a way her diner work had never made her feel. This mattered. This could actually change lives. You did well today, Choi said as they drove back toward her neighborhood. You understand something my other employees don't. That power without understanding is just violence with better packaging. Is that what your criminal work is? Violence with better packaging? He considered the question seriously. Sometimes it's necessary evil. Sometimes it's just evil. His gaze held hers. I've never pretended otherwise, Miss Jefferson. I've done terrible things. But that doesn't mean I can't also do something good. Can those 2 things coexist? The terrible and the good? We're about to find out. Choi's expression grew distant. My enemies won't like what I'm building here. Legitimacy threatens them. It creates questions about why I'm changing, what I might reveal, who I might turn against. There will be pushback. What kind of pushback? The kind Dante is here to prevent. The first 3 weeks passed in a blur of site visits, community meetings, and learning the intricate dance of Choi's dual existence. In public, he was a philanthropist, a reformed businessman putting wealth back into struggling neighborhoods. In private, Layla caught glimpses of the other world. Coded phone calls, men with dead eyes delivering packages, conversations that stopped abruptly when she entered rooms. She didn't ask about those things. Choi had been clear. Her work was legitimate, separate. And Layla told herself that was enough, that she could exist in his orbit without being contaminated by the darkness. Then came the night that shattered that illusion. Layla was walking home from a late community meeting, Dante 3 steps behind as always, when the van pulled up. No warning, no build-up, just screeching tires and doors flying open and hands grabbing her before she could scream. Dante moved like lightning, dropping the first attacker with a brutal elbow strike. But there were 4 of them, professionals, and one got a taser against his ribs. He went down hard, and then they had Layla in the van, and she was kicking, screaming, fighting with everything she had learned growing up in Inglewood. A fist caught her temple. Stars exploded across her vision, and then there was only darkness. Layla woke to cold and pain and the smell of old concrete. Her head throbbed where she'd been hit, and her hands were zip-tied behind her back. She was in a basement, maybe, or another abandoned warehouse. Chicago had thousands of spaces like this, perfect for the kind of violence that needed privacy. 3 men stood nearby, talking in low voices. One of them, tall, European-looking, with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, noticed she was awake. "Good," he said in accented English. Russian, she thought. "We can begin." "Begin what?" Layla's voice came out stronger than she felt. "Sending a message to your boss." Scarface walked closer, crouching so they were eye level. "Choi Hyun-jun has something my employer wants. Information about the shipment. You're going to help convince him to share." "I don't know anything about shipments." The truth, desperate and useless. "Doesn't matter. Your leverage, that's enough." He pulled out a phone, started filming. "Mr. Choi, as you can see, we have your pet project. Such a pretty girl. It would be shame if something happened to that pretty face. You have 6 hours to deliver the information we discussed, or we start sending her back to you in pieces." The phone disappeared. Scarface stood, nodding to one of his associates. "Make her comfortable, but not too comfortable." They left her tied in that cold room, alone with her thoughts, and the certainty that she'd been catastrophically stupid. Choi had warned her. The danger wasn't theoretical anymore. It was zip ties cutting into her wrists, and men who discussed dismembering her like it was a business transaction. Hours crawled past, or maybe minutes. Time felt liquid, unreliable. Layla's mind raced through scenarios. Would Choi even come for her? She'd only worked for him a few weeks. Maybe she was expendable, a calculated loss in whatever war he was fighting. But then she remembered his face when he talked about his grandmother, the woman who'd raised him, the genuine regret in his voice when he discussed his wasted years, and something in her gut said he'd come. The question was whether he'd arrive before Scarface made good on his threat. The door burst open 3 hours later. Layla had been counting seconds, a trick her father taught her when time needed measuring. But it wasn't Scarface. It was chaos. Gunfire erupted from somewhere above, shouts in multiple languages, the sound of breaking glass and splintering wood. Her captors grabbed weapons, moving with professional precision toward the stairs. More gunshots, closer now. Then silence, terrible and complete. Footsteps descended, slow, measured, utterly controlled. Choi Hyun-jun appeared in the doorway, and Layla barely recognized him. Gone was the polished philanthropist. This version wore all black, held a gun with the comfort of long familiarity, and had blood spatter across his face. Behind him, Dante and 3 other men swept the space, weapons raised. "Miss Jefferson." Choi's voice was soft, terrifyingly soft. He crossed to her, pulling a knife from his belt and cutting through the zip ties with a practiced motion. "Are you hurt?" "My head. They hit me." Layla's hands were free now, circulation returning and painful pins and needles. Choi's jaw tightened. He looked up at Dante. "Find them. All of them. Make it educational." "Boss," Dante started. "Now." Dante and his team vanished up the stairs. More gunshots echoed from outside, distant screams. Choi helped Layla to her feet, his hands gentle despite the violence radiating from him. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "This is my fault. I should have had more protection on you. You killed them." Not a question. Layla had heard enough gunfire to know when bullets found flesh. "Yes, and I'll kill anyone else who tries to hurt you." He said it simply, factually. "That's the world you're in now, Miss Jefferson. I can't change that. I can only promise to keep you safe within it." They walked out through a nightmare. Bodies in the hallway, Scarface among them, his expression frozen in surprise. Dante met them outside, holstering his weapon. "Clean," he reported. "No witnesses, no survivors." Layla's stomach turned. She'd known intellectually what Choi was, but seeing the aftermath of his violence was different. This was real, permanent. Men who were breathing minutes ago were now corpses being loaded into a van for disposal. "Take her home," Choi instructed Dante. "Triple the security detail, and find out how they knew her schedule." "Wait," Layla's voice cut through the night. Both men turned to her. "You came for me. Why?" Choi's expression softened, just slightly. "Because I gave you my word that you'd be protected. In my world, Miss Jefferson, that's everything. My word is law, even to myself." The SUV ride home was silent except for Layla's occasional shaking. "Adrenaline crash," Dante explained quietly, handing her a bottle of water. "Normal after situations like that." She drank mechanically, watching Chicago pass by outside tinted windows, and realized with cold clarity that normal had just been redefined. By the time they reached her apartment, it was 3 a.m. Zara would be asleep, blissfully unaware that her sister had just been kidnapped and rescued by a man who killed with the same efficiency he applied to business deals. "You should take a few days," Dante suggested as they reached her door. "No." Layla's voice was firm. "I have community meetings tomorrow. We're finalizing the Bronzeville Center plans. I'll be there." Dante studied her with something like respect. "You're tougher than you look." "I grew up in Inglewood," Layla replied. "Tonight wasn't my first brush with violence. It was just the first time someone came to save me." She went inside, locked every lock, and stood in her tiny kitchen shaking until the sun came up. Then she showered, dressed professionally, and went to work, because that's what survival looked like in Choi Hyun-jun's world. And Layla Jefferson had never been anything but a survivor. Over the next 6 weeks, the community centers took shape. Not just buildings, but real programs staffed by real people from the neighborhoods they served. Layla threw herself into the work with desperate focus, trying not to think about the bodies in that warehouse, the casual way Choi had ordered their deaths. But avoidance only worked for so long. It was during a site inspection in Englewood, her own neighborhood, transformed with fresh paint and purpose, that Layla finally confronted what had been building inside her. "You killed those men for me," she said to Choi as they walked through the completed computer lab. The statement hung between them. "Yes." "Do you regret it?" "No." He stopped walking, turned to face her fully. "They took something under my protection. That has consequences, absolute consequences. I watched people hurt my father for his debts, loan sharks who beat him when he couldn't pay, who threatened to hurt me and Zara if he didn't find money. I used to wish someone would make them stop, make them hurt the way they hurt us." She met Choi's dark eyes. "You did that for me. You retaliated against people who tried to hurt me, and I should feel guilty about that, shouldn't I?" "Should you?" "But I don't." The confession tasted like relief. "I feel protected, safe for the first time in years. Does that make me a terrible person?" Choi's expression held understanding, not judgment. "It makes you human. The world isn't the fairy tale they teach children, Miss Jefferson. Sometimes violence is the only language certain people understand. I don't apologize for speaking it fluently when necessary. But you're trying to build something good now. Doesn't the violence contaminate that?" "Perhaps." He gestured around the lab, where computers waited for students who'd never had access to technology. Or perhaps good deeds don't erase bad ones, but they exist anyway, separate, parallel. I can't undo the violence I've committed, but I can prevent future violence by giving people alternatives. It was the most honest moral framework Layla had ever encountered. Not pretending redemption was simple, or that goodness canceled out evil, just acknowledging that both could coexist in the same person, the same life, the same moment. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for coming for me, for keeping me safe." "Always," Choi replied, and Layla believed him. The Bronzeville Center opened 2 months after Layla started working for Choi. They held a community event, music, food, demonstrations of the programs. Layla watched families pour through the doors, saw the hope and possibility in their faces, and felt something shift in her chest. This was real. This mattered. Later, as the crowd thinned, Choi found her standing in the empty computer lab. "You've done well," he said. "Better than I expected." "I had a good teacher," Layla smiled. "You showed me that power doesn't have to be destructive, that money from dark places can still build light." "Don't romanticize me, Miss Jefferson. I'm still a criminal. I know, but you're also the reason 40 kids are going to learn coding tomorrow. Both things are true." She turned to him. "That's what I've learned from you, that people are more complicated than good or bad. We're everything all at once." Choi nodded slowly, something like pride crossing his features. "You're wise beyond your years." "I had to be." Layla's voice carried the weight of her 21 years fighting to survive. Wisdom or death, those were my options growing up. They stood in comfortable silence, watching through the windows as the Chicago night settled over a neighborhood transformed. Not saved. Layla was smart enough to know community centers weren't magic, but changed, given tools and opportunity and hope. "What happens next?" she asked finally. "We build more centers, expand the programs, teach more people that there are alternatives to the life I lived." Choi's expression grew distant. "And you keep growing, Miss Jefferson. Keep challenging me. Keep making this real instead of just another rich man's guilt project." "Deal." They shook hands, a formal gesture that felt significant. "Partners," she turned to him. "That's what I've learned from you, that people are more complicated than good or bad. We're everything all at once." Choi nodded slowly, something like pride crossing his features. "You're wise beyond your years." "I had to be." Layla's voice carried the weight of her 21 years fighting to survive, both broken in different ways, both trying to build something better from the wreckage. And as Layla walked out into the night, Dante falling into step behind her, she realized she wasn't the same girl who'd walked into Galaxy Savings Bank 3 months ago. She was someone new, someone stronger, someone who'd learned that survival wasn't just about getting through, it was about transforming pain into purpose. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in her life, Layla Jefferson was exactly where she needed to be. 6 months transformed landscapes. The Bronzeville Center thrived, spawning 3 more locations across Chicago's South Side and West Side. Layla had become a fixture in community meetings, no longer the nervous girl making deposit payments, but a woman who commanded rooms with quiet authority. Zara was thriving in a private school Choi's money had made possible, her textbooks new, her shoes without holes, her future suddenly bright with possibility. And Choi was dying. The cancer diagnosis came on a Tuesday in late autumn. Pancreatic, stage 4, inoperable. 6 months, maybe less. He'd told Layla himself, his voice steady, his expression unchanged, as if death was just another business arrangement to be negotiated. They'd agreed to meet one final time in his penthouse study, a room Layla had visited often over the past months, but never fully absorbed. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined with volumes in Korean, English, and Japanese. A desk of dark wood that had probably witnessed more criminal negotiations than she could imagine, and windows overlooking Lake Michigan, the water stretching endlessly toward a horizon painted in sunset colors. Choi sat in a leather chair near the window, a cigar burning slowly in an ashtray beside him. The smoke curled upward, catching the fading light. He'd lost weight, his suit hanging differently now, but his eyes remained sharp, those dark, assessing eyes that had first seen something in Layla worth investing in. "Miss Jefferson," he gestured to the chair across from him. Thank you for coming. Of course. Layla settled into the seat, noting the way his hands trembled slightly. The disease was eating him from inside, but he maintained that rigid control she'd come to recognize as his default state. How are you feeling? Like a man who made too many enemies and is now racing them to the finish line. A wry smile. The doctors give me 3 months. I suspect I have less. My body's been in negotiations with death for 70 decades. We're finally reaching terms. Layla felt tears prick her eyes, but refused to let them fall. Choi wouldn't appreciate that. Is there anything I can do? Actually, yes. That's why I asked you here. He leaned forward slightly, the movement costing visible effort. I need to tell you things, Layla. Things I've learned in 70 years of living wrong. Not instructions. You're too smart for that. But observations. Wisdom exchange, as you once called it. This was it. The conversation Layla had known was coming since the diagnosis, the moment when the mentor passed down final lessons before stepping off the stage. She straightened her spine, giving him the attention he deserved. "Tell me," she said simply. Choi took a long draw from his cigar, holding the smoke before exhaling slowly. First lesson. Trust is currency, but it's the most dangerous kind. In my world, I learned early that betrayal hides in shadows wearing friendly faces. My first major loss came from a partner I considered a brother. He sold me out to rival gangs for profit, cost me 3 allies, nearly my life, and taught me that trust must be earned in blood and time, never freely given. He paused, watching her reaction. Layla nodded, understanding the weight of that lesson. Like how I verify everything now, even with people who seem sincere. The community leaders who promised to help but wanted kickbacks. I caught them because you taught me to always look for the angle. Exactly. You adapted that principle to legitimate work, which is smarter than my application. Approval flickered across his weathered features. But here's the nuance I wish someone had taught me. While you trust sparingly, don't become so isolated that you lose your humanity. I built walls so high, even good people couldn't reach me. That's how I ended up 70 and alone except for employees. Lila absorbed this, thinking about her own tendency to keep people at arm's length. Growing up poor had taught her that vulnerability was dangerous, that people exploited weakness. But Choi's loneliness was a cautionary tale. Protection taken so far it became a prison. I see that in myself sometimes, she admitted. The instinct to isolate, to handle everything alone because depending on others feels risky. But Zara needs me to be more than just a survivor. She needs me to show her that connection is possible. Yes, Choi's voice carried satisfaction. You understand. Which brings me to the second lesson. Violence is a tool, not a solution. I spent decades believing that strength meant being feared, that dominance required brutality. And yes, sometimes violence is necessary. Those men who took you needed to understand consequences. But I used violence as a first response when it should have been a last resort. How do you know when it's necessary versus when it's just easier? Lila leaned forward, genuinely curious. This was the question that had haunted her since the warehouse rescue. Ask yourself, am I protecting or am I punishing? Protection is defensive. You're preventing harm. Punishment is about ego, about making others feel your power. The men who kidnapped you, that was protection. But many others I hurt over the years, pure punishment, pure ego, and it solved nothing permanently. Just created more enemies, more cycles of violence. Lila thought about the situations she'd encountered in community work. Aggressive fathers at meetings, territorial gang members near the centers, people who tested boundaries. She'd handled them with words, with de-escalation, with strategic retreat when necessary. Not because she was weak, but because she'd watched violence create endless cycles in her neighborhood. This validation from Choi felt important. I've been applying that without realizing it, she said slowly. When gang members tried to recruit from our coding program, I didn't call you for muscle. I talked to their leaders, explained that the kids were more valuable educated than as runners, made it about smart business, not disrespect. And it worked because you understood the third lesson, know your opponent's language. Choi's eyes gleamed. You grew up around street culture, so you knew how to frame the conversation. That's something my expensive education never taught me, that every negotiation requires speaking the other person's language, not imposing yours. Whether it's street dealers, corporate investors, or community activists, you have to meet them in their world first. That's why the centers work, because I didn't come in speaking philanthropy-ese. I spoke Inglewood, Bronzeville, Austin. I knew the real concerns, not what outsiders think the concerns are, but what people actually worry about when rent is due and kids are hungry. Precisely. You have a gift for translation between worlds. Choi stubbed out his cigar carefully, which is why the fourth lesson matters. Build doors in your walls, but never forget where they are. Protection is necessary, boundaries are necessary, but isolation is death, spiritual if not physical. I built an empire so secure that I ended up trapped inside it. You've already built walls from your experiences. Make sure they have escape routes. The metaphor landed with weight. Lila thought about her relationship with Choi itself, how she'd maintained clear boundaries about illegal activity, about keeping Zara separate, about her own limits. But she'd also opened doors for genuine connection, for learning, for transformation. The door I built was working for you, she reflected. I could have stayed stuck in the diner, safe in my poverty. Instead, I risked the door you offered. It changed everything. It changed both of us. Choi's voice softened. You gave me something I didn't know I was searching for. Proof that redemption isn't about erasing the past, but about building something meaningful despite it. Every kid who learns coding in those centers is a door in my walls, a way out of the isolation I constructed. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of mutual transformation hanging between them. Lila had arrived at this study expecting a one-way lesson, the dying mentor imparting wisdom to the young student. Instead, she was realizing they'd been teaching each other all along. Fifth lesson. Choi's voice grew slightly hoarse. Regret is poison, but acknowledgement is antidote. For years, I refused to name what I'd done. I called it business, strategy, necessary evil. All true, perhaps, but also insufficient. I killed people, Layla, destroyed families, built wealth on suffering. No amount of community centers changes that calculus. But acknowledging it, that changed me, allowed me to act differently going forward. This was the heart of it, the moral complexity Layla had been wrestling with since that first car ride. You're saying you can't make up for bad things, but you can stop doing them and start doing better? More than that. I'm saying the bad things I did are permanently bad. They don't get neutralized by good deeds. Both exist simultaneously, the violence and the community centers, the deaths and the educations. I'm both the man who killed and the man who built. Accepting that duality without trying to erase either side, that's the only honest way forward. Layla processed this, feeling something click into place. She'd been trying to figure out if Choi was good or bad, if working for him made her complicit or righteous. But he was showing her that humans didn't fit into binary categories. They were collections of choices, some terrible, some beautiful, all real. I've been carrying guilt, she admitted, about accepting your money, about benefiting from your protection, wondering if that makes me dirty somehow. But I'm saying acknowledge where the resources come from, use them wisely, and don't pretend they're clean. Dirty money can build clean futures if you're honest about the transaction. Choi shifted, wincing slightly. Which brings me to lesson 6. Forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. My grandmother, the woman who raised me, she died believing I was good. I've spent my life feeling like I betrayed that belief. But recently I've been thinking, maybe she knew. Maybe she saw my capacity for violence and loved me anyway, hoping I'd find my way back to goodness eventually. Do you think she'd forgive the things you've done? Layla asked softly. I think she'd be sad about them, disappointed, but also proud of the centers, of the chances we're giving people. She cleaned houses so I could eat. She understood survival in poverty. She'd recognize what we're building. His eyes grew distant. Forgiveness isn't erasing history. It's loving someone despite their history, believing they can still grow. Layla felt tears building again, these ones harder to contain. That's how I feel about my father. He gambled away our security, left me with debt and responsibility way too young. I was angry for so long, but he also taught me resilience, how to fight, how to survive. Both things are true, the damage and the gifts. Exactly. Honor the gifts, acknowledge the damage, forgive what you can without forgetting what happened. That's how we carry our dead forward. Choi's voice roughened with emotion, which is my 7th lesson. The dead only truly die when we stop carrying their wisdom. My grandmother taught me that dignity mattered more than wealth. I forgot that for decades, but I'm remembering now through this work, through you. And my father taught me that survival requires adaptability, legal, illegal, whatever works. You're teaching me that survival can transform into thriving if you have the right resources and guidance. Layla smiled through her tears. We're all carrying our dead forward, making their struggles matter by building on them. Yes, the word carried weight, finality. And that's my final lesson. Legacy is not what you leave, it's what you inspire others to build. I'll die soon, Layla. My empire will fracture, my businesses will be absorbed by rivals, my name will fade. But these centers, if you keep building them, expanding them, teaching others how to bridge worlds the way you do, that ripples forward. That's legacy, not monuments to my name, but momentum that keeps moving after I'm gone. Layla absorbed this, feeling the responsibility settle onto her shoulders. You want me to continue the work. I want you to transform it into something entirely yours. Choi pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket with trembling fingers. I've arranged everything. The community centers transferred to a nonprofit under your direction. Funding secured for 10 years, renewable. Key contacts who can help you navigate both legitimate and less legitimate obstacles. And protection. Dante will remain your head of security if you want him. He's loyal to the mission now, not just to me. The envelope felt heavy in Layla's hands. Inside was power, responsibility, transformation, everything she needed to take this from Choi's redemption project to her own vision. Why me? The question she'd asked 6 months ago, now loaded with new meaning. Because you're smart enough to succeed, ethical enough to stay true to the mission, and experienced enough with violence to understand when it's necessary and when it's just ego. Choi's smile was genuine, warm, the first truly unguarded expression she'd ever seen from him. Because you remind me of that woman who raised me. Because I believe you'll do better with this power than I ever did. Layla stood, crossing to where Choi sat. She embraced him gently, feeling his frailty, his mortality. This was goodbye, not in words, but in understanding. The mentor was passing the torch, trusting the student to carry it forward. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me, for giving me this chance, for teaching me that redemption is messy and complicated and still worth pursuing. Thank you, Choi replied, for being the kind of person who makes an old criminal believe in the possibility of grace. They pulled apart. Layla walked to the door, then turned back one more time. Your grandmother was right about you, she said. You are good, just complicated good, difficult good, but still good. Choi's eyes glistened, the only sign of emotion he'd allow himself. Go build something beautiful, Layla Jefferson. Make all our struggles worth it. Layla left the penthouse as sunset bled into twilight, the Chicago skyline glittering with 1,000,000 lights representing 1,000,000 lives. Dante waited by the elevator, his expression knowing. He told you, he said. Not a question. He did. Layla clutched the envelope. Will you stay? Help me build this? Until the mission is complete or I'm dead. Dante's smile was slight. Those are my terms. They descended together, emerging onto Michigan Avenue, where the wealthy and homeless coexisted in uncomfortable proximity. Layla thought about Choi's lessons, about walls with doors, about building legacy through inspiration rather than monuments. The community centers would expand, the programs would evolve. Young people like her, smart, hungry, desperate for alternatives, would find pathways out of poverty that didn't require crime or exploitation. It wouldn't save everyone. It wouldn't erase the violence Choi had committed or the systems that created poverty in the first place. But it would matter. And that was enough. 3 weeks later, Choi Hyun-jun died in his sleep. Painlessly, the doctor said, though Layla wondered if someone like him ever truly found peace. His funeral was private, sparsely attended, mostly employees and a few old associates paying respects more from fear than love. Layla stood at the grave as they lowered his casket, thinking about the complicated man who'd changed her life. Criminal and philanthropist, violent and protective, isolated and desperately seeking connection. He'd contained multitudes, contradictions that never fully resolved, just like everyone else if they were being honest. She placed a single flower on the grave, white chrysanthemums, traditional for Korean funerals. Then she turned away, Dante and Zara flanking her as they walked toward the car. Was he a good man? Zara asked. At 17 now, she'd grown sophisticated enough to understand complexity. He was a man who did bad things and tried to do better, Layla replied honestly. That's the best answer I can give. Is that enough? To try? Layla thought about the centers, about the kids learning coding and job skills, about the futures being built on a foundation of tainted money and genuine hope. It has to be, because none of us are purely good or purely bad. We're just doing our best with the tools we have. They drove back to their new apartment, nicer neighborhood, actual bedrooms, space to breathe. Zara went to do homework while Layla spread the contents of Choi's envelope across the dining table. Deeds, contacts, financial documents, strategic plans. The roadmap for the next decade of work. At the bottom was a handwritten note in Choi's precise script. Ms. Jefferson, you once asked me why I pushed everyone away. The truth is fear. Fear that if people saw the real me, the violent criminal beneath the suits and manners, they would run. You saw all of me and stayed. That was the greatest gift anyone ever gave me. Don't make my mistakes. Build walls when you need protection, but leave doors for love, friendship, connection. The work you're doing matters, but so does the life you live while doing it. Don't end up 70 and alone, wondering if anyone will mourn you genuinely. Your quick thinking, your street wisdom, your ability to spot danger and opportunity simultaneously, these are the reasons you'll succeed where I failed. You don't just understand the world I came from, you're transforming it from the inside. The centers are yours now. Make them better than I could have imagined. Make them proof that even dirty money can grow clean futures. Make them living evidence that redemption is real, even if it's complicated. I died proud of you, Layla Jefferson. Died believing your generation will do better than mine did. Don't prove me wrong. Build something beautiful. C.H.J. Layla read the note 3 times, tears streaming freely now. Then she folded it carefully, placed it in her wallet next to her father's last photo. 2 men who'd taught her about survival and transformation, who'd shown her that growth sometimes came from darkness. She opened her laptop, began drafting expansion plans for the 5th community center. This one would be in Austin, one of Chicago's most violent neighborhoods. It would have a computer lab, a recording studio for young musicians, a gymnasium with actual equipment. It would hire locals, train locals, serve locals, and it would be funded by a dead criminal's final attempt at redemption, transformed by a young black woman who understood that dirty money could still plant clean seeds. Zara emerged from her room hours later, finding Lila still working. You okay? Yeah. Lila smiled, genuine and tired. I'm building something beautiful. What's it feel like? Lila considered the question, thinking about everything that had led her here. Poverty and debt, bank humiliation and kidnapping, violence and protection, death and legacy. It feels like turning pain into purpose, like making all the struggle mean something. Good. Zara hugged her sister. Dad would be proud. So would that scary old man who gave you this chance. Yeah, Lila whispered into her sister's hair. I think they would be. That night, lying in bed, Lila thought about Choi's lessons, about trust as currency and violence as a last resort, about knowing your opponent's language and building doors and walls, about acknowledging harm without letting it paralyze you, about carrying the dead forward through inspired action rather than monuments. She thought about the quiet wisdom exchange they'd shared. Not mentor dictating to student, but two people who'd survived different kinds of violence, learning from each other's scars. Choi had given her resources and protection. She'd given him proof that redemption was possible, even if imperfect. Both had transformed the other. Both had grown. And now Lila would carry that growth forward, building centers and training others, and creating pathways for people who needed alternatives. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but honestly, acknowledging where the resources came from while ensuring they created genuine good. Outside her window, Chicago hummed with life. Sirens and music, laughter and arguments, the endless pulse of a city that had seen every kind of human struggle. Somewhere in that darkness, kids were making choices about their futures. Some would choose crime, some would choose education, some would find complicated paths between the two. Lila's job was to expand the options, to show them that complicated paths were valid, that transformation was real, that you didn't have to be purely good to do good things. The journey was far from over. It was just beginning. But for the first time in her 21 years, Lila Jefferson wasn't just surviving. She was thriving, building, creating legacy from the ashes of poverty and violence. And as she drifted toward sleep, she carried Choi's final words like a blessing: build something beautiful. She would. She was. She'd never stop. Because that's what wisdom looked like. Transforming lessons learned in darkness into light for those who came after. That's what legacy looked like. Not monuments to name, but movements that kept moving. That's what redemption looked like. Complicated, imperfect, but genuine. And that's what Lila Jefferson would spend the rest of her life proving, that even broken people could build unbroken futures, one community center at a time. The end. What's the most valuable lesson someone taught you that changed your life? Share in the comments. We want to hear your wisdom exchange stories. And if this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to Love and Tension for more stories about transformation, redemption, and the complicated reality of being human. Drop a comment telling us, are you Team Lila, building from the ground up, or Team Choi, redemption is always possible? Your perspective matters.